Thanks to the Discord, I recently got introduced to the book Assholes, a Theory. It's written by a professor of philosophy at the University of California who happens to be an avid surfer. Aaron James was inspired to write this book after countless surf sessions were ruined by assholes refusing to adhere to the rules of right-of-way in regards to a tasty wave. James is essentially a grown-up version of Jeff Spicoli, inspired by Mr. Hand to go off and pursue that degree after graduating from Ridgemont High. Now, it was originally pointed to his book Surfing with Sartre, but honestly, how could you pass up a book called Assholes, a Theory, and the idea of exploring the idea of an asshole through a rigorous philosophical lens honestly really intrigued me. Right off the start, James formulates a definition of an asshole as someone who, one, allows himself certain advantages and does so systematically. Two, he does this out of an entrenched sense of entitlement. And three, this sense of entitlement immunizes him against the complaints of others. Now, number one is actually pretty important. This sort of allows himself special advantages and does so systematically, because to truly be an asshole, this needs to be an entrenched character trait, because everyone can act like an asshole in a particular situation. I mean, that doesn't necessarily make you an asshole. We've all done asshole things in the past, like maybe taking the last deviled eggs at the family picnic, even though your aunt hasn't even had one yet. Although driven by a sense of gluttony as opposed to entitlement, maybe that's more of a dick move. Then there's this idea of like traversing 2 lanes of traffic, jamming up traffic behind you just to get to that nearly missed exit, because at that moment, your time is worth more than everybody else's there on the road. Certainly an asshole move, albeit a little minor. We get into the major, like contesting the loss of a democratically held election, making fun of disabled people, and grabbing women indiscriminately because you're a winner certainly qualifies you as an asshole. That seems pretty clear-cut, but how do you know if you're an asshole? Well, as they say in Justified, if you met an asshole in the morning, you met an asshole. If you meet assholes all day, you're the asshole. Now, maybe the idea that if you're willing to call yourself an asshole, then you're probably not an asshole. Though James would argue that thinking is a bit flawed and cites an Onion article, asshole admits to being an asshole in a supreme asshole move. So more precisely, it's more the idea that if you worry about being considered an asshole, and that's accompanied by a sense of shame, then maybe you're not really an asshole, because assholes, if they had that, accusation levied against them, would at most offer up a mere whatever. But if, as James says, they enjoy a stable sense of delight at that notion, well, in fact, they are probably most definitely an asshole. So why are assholes all men? Arguably, this could be purely linguistic, that asshole is a gendered term, much in the same way a bachelor is. We don't call single women bachelors. In the same way, we don't call them assholes, instead referring to the feminine corollary, bitch. But then James would go on to say he has no problems calling Ann Coulter an asshole, and I tend to agree. So he gets very precise. A bitch is someone who enjoys special advantages out of a sense of entitlement, but at least makes a show of recognition and listens to the complaints of others before willfully ignoring them out of a sense of entitlement. This is gendered behavior, certainly, but a bitch basically betrays you behind your back, where an asshole fails to recognize you to your face. And Coulter is only one in a long list of assholes cited in the book that clearly date this thing. It was written nearly a decade ago, back in 2012, and becomes more clear when he examines the subtypes of assholes and the examples given. For boorish asshole, someone who completely disregards notions of respect and courtesy, he offers up Noel Gallagher of Oasis. And for, most tellingly, presidential asshole, he offers up Silvio Berlusconi of Italy. Now, back in 2012, he's still under self-delusional asshole includes Kanye West, and under self-aggrandizing asshole cites Donald Trump back when he was still obsessed with birtherism. James is almost ready to dismiss Trump as merely an ass clown, like an extreme narcissist only looking to self-aggrandize himself, but manages to firmly plant him in the asshole camp. In fact, the book on assholes, specifically his positioning of Trump, seems so prescient, he followed this up with a sequel that I read called Assholes, A Theory of Donald Trump. Written in 2016, already it seems quaint and dated in 2023. It's like Donald Trump is a next level uber asshole, innovating and always changing the game. This is where we dip into asshole capitalism, which has 3 essential traits. 1, incentives. entitlements like personal enrichment, regardless of the larger social cost. 2, undermanagement, lack of robust systems like journalism, for example, to reliably dampen asshole profusion. And 3, destabilization. The absolute preponderance and growth of assholes prevents cooperation, which is needed to keep the system healthy. And so the system further declines. Here in 2023, we are in the midst of asshole capitalism. James was ringing the warning bell in 2012, and we see how bad it's gotten in the ensuing 10 years. I'm not exactly sure what we're supposed to do at the macro level when it comes to asshole capitalism, so we consider the individual. James posits that assholes great particularly because they fail to recognize us in a fundamentally morally important way. They ignore us and our rights. But conversely, siding with the asshole can make you feel recognized and seen. It feels like you're entitled to the same enrichments. You forgo cooperation in favor of getting what's yours, regardless of the cost of other people or the larger social cost. And this could be even more empowering if you were someone who was marginalized, ignored, invisible. Having the asshole transfer those feelings onto another person or persons can feel especially empowering. And here in this intention economy, we favor the asshole. Their behavior is outrageous, laughable, but it garners attention. But it's a different story if you have to live or work with an asshole. But what if you're on the receiving end? Well, it's a matter of speaking up, knowing full well that your words likely will not be heard and will likely not change future behavior as far as the asshole goes. It is simply to state our competence and understanding of the current situation to a generic audience. So in the case of the asshole that cuts in front of us in line, speaking up basically acknowledges that everyone else, that they deserve better and they appreciate having their rights upheld for all to hear. In this case, addressing the asshole is simply to get them to recognize us all as equals. Again, it's a matter of saying the right thing at the right time, picking your battles, and James argues that perhaps you don't need to devote your entire life to the art of asshole aikido, and there are better uses of one's time, which leads to the question, does one need to read a philosophical treatise on assholes? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I'm just trying something new here. I'm trying to get away from frontlist literary fiction, and I'm starting to, dabble in sci-fi and modern philosophy, which feels like a Gen X answer to baby boomers reading sports biographies and World War II histories. The thing is, I'm not a smart guy. Philosophy is tough for me. Maybe this is all patently obvious to you out there, but for me, it's really freaking difficult. It breaks my brain, and when I get it, it breaks my brain in wonderful sort of ways, but it is really tough. And I started on this journey with Byung-Chul Han's The Scent of Time, which I really enjoyed and I kind of got. And so feeling my philosophical wild oats, I, ventured over into Theodore Adorno's The Culture Industry, and that was a hard note, backed up, did not understand a damn thing. It was like reading words on the page that look like English, but I'm just sounding them out like I'm a grade schooler and not making any sense of the words at all. I think for me, Byung-Chul Han's Scent of Time was easier and more graspable because it's written in German. Byung-Chul Han is South Korean. German is his second language, and then it's subsequently translated into English to me, so it's been twice simplified. Scent of Time, like assholes, feels graspable, and I got it, and I liked working my way through it. And even if I am drawing completely incorrect conclusions from the text there, it's like working a muscle. And frankly, that muscle gets stronger through use and more practice. And so, yeah, I didn't mind the experience at all. Arguably, this could have been a long-form Atlantic article, but one can hardly argue with a book coming in at a slim 200 pages and the sort of rigorous argument around assholes. Even better, the book itself prompted a documentary from John Walker that's available for free on the CBC documentary channel. So there you have it, Assholes, a Theory. If you've got any recommendations for modern living philosophers that are worth checking out that aren't completely inscrutable, I'd love to hear your responses in the comments down below. And on the sci-fi kick, I am being immersed in Adrian Tchaikovsky's Children of Time, which I finished, absolutely freaking loved, just blazed through it, so much so that I actually picked, uncharacteristic of me, the second book of the series, and I'm reading Children of Ruin right now. It's a little slower going off the hop than coming off the high of Children of Time, but I've gotten to a critical point. in the story. Things are really picking up. I am enjoying this one immensely as well. I appreciate the fact that Tchaikovsky, on top of having a pretty cool name for sci-fi, Tchaikovsky, I just imagine that the name of some sort of Earth spaceship, but also is a zoologist, and that sort of past history is being brought to bear in a lot of his thinking around this particular book. Anyway, it's a trilogy that concludes with Children of Memory, I believe it is, the third book that was just released recently that I may have to get to as well. And eventually I'm going to finally finish the Three Body Problem series with book 3, which is also in the queue. We'll see how long this sort of sci-fi kick lasts, but right now, as summer winds to a close, the kids start going back to school. I am really in the thick of it. So that's it for me as far as reading goes. Who knows when I'll be back to talk to you again about books. But in the meantime, I hope you have a great week of reading, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.